Hi, everybody. So great to see you today. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to jump right into it because we've got a really great discussion today about utility forestry and urban forestry. As one of my good friends, Dennis Fallon of the Utility Arborists Association says, the utility forest lives in the urban forest and the urban forest lives in the utility forest. And so when we're trying to make important tree decisions, grow our canopy, we really need to take into account safe, reliable delivery of power. And we're so fortunate to have Earl from Washington, D.C. Urban Forestry, and Nathan from Pepco to talk about the issues that they've worked on together. So to keep us right on time, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to share a little bit more about the Urban and Community Forestry Society, which I just realized I haven't introduced myself. I am Leslie Burkus. I am the Executive Director of the Urban and Community Forestry Society. And with that, I'm going to share a little bit more about our association so you know how you can connect with us. So Earl, I am presenting now. Does it look okay on your end?
Sure does, yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks again, everyone. Again, an intro to the association, and then we'll hear from Earl Eutsler, State Forester for Washington, D.C., and Nathan McElroy with Pepco, who will talk more about policy choices that led to some pretty poor implications for the urban forest and utility forest in Washington, D.C., how the two of them work together to really collaborate and prioritize conflicts between utility and tree, and how they've stayed in communication since then to help mitigate some of those problems that had been, and how they're working to make sure they don't happen again in the future. And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. With that, really would love for you to drop your name in the chat and where you're from. We have people from across the US and across the globe joining us, and it's fun to see where everyone's from. So drop your name and where you're from in the chat. This webinar is being recorded and I will be posting it on YouTube afterwards. It's approved for one ISA CEU, and at the end of this presentation, I will drop the form in the chat and you can submit your ISA information and I will turn that in on your behalf. And you are on mute, but Nathan and Earl really would like to make this more conversational. I know that's a little hard on a webinar, but if you have a question throughout the presentation, feel free to raise your hand and I will bring you off mute and I'll give a little cue to Earl and Nathan and say we have a question and we can jump in that way. Or if you have something you want to put in the chat, feel free to do that as well. So with that, what is and who is the Urban and Community Forestry Society? Well, we are an international membership association that is dedicated to building the confidence, competence, and camaraderie of all professionals who manage trees and forests to create and sustain more livable communities. So breaking that down more, it's really saying that we are the professional membership home for the people who make and support daily tree planting and care decisions in communities. If you are a city forester, you've been hired to make a daily tree care decision. You are stewarding the trees of your community. Perhaps you work for a state urban forestry department and you're helping support the folks who are making a daily decision. Or maybe you work for a private company who is helping support people making daily tree care decisions. Overall, we want to really help support the managers of trees because you are who makes our urban forestry goals happen. You are the frontline workers, boots on the ground, and we need you to help us grow urban forestry. But we want you to feel confident in those decisions, and that is exactly what this association is here for. There's power in that. There's power in being with your people, and that's why we exist. And we've been doing this since 1964. We are a membership-based organization, as I said. So thank you to our members who are here today. You are who make this possible. Your dues help make these types of things possible. If you're not a member, really hope that you'll join when the time is right. You should be with your people. So please join this association when it feels right for you. We are an international membership organization, and that's largely because we are a professional affiliate of the International Society of Arboriculture. And really what that means is that we work hand in hand with ISA to support urban forestry, work with them on credentialing, and overall just raise the profile of urban forestry across the globe. If you are a member or not, here are a few ways that you could connect with us. Hopefully you are subscribed to our City Trees publication. We are so proud of this. I think it's one of the premier publications out there regarding urban forestry. And it really highlights some technical information along with personal interest stories so we can learn more about the people who are managing trees. And once you're there, how do you keep your workers safe during high heat events? What might you be needing to think about with the latest pest and disease issues coming up? That's what we're highlighting in this publication. We have our Arborist Exchange program, which is a members only opportunity. And this provides up to $2,000 for folks to travel to another urban forestry program and see it in action. It's one thing to maybe hear what Earl is doing in DC, but maybe you want to see it on ground and see how they're really working with Pepco or another community across the country or world that you might want to visit. That's what Arborist Exchange is about. Get to see it in person and then bring it home to your community and start implementing that where you live. Our accreditation program is one of those programs is really for you to help stand out what your community is doing. If you're meeting high standards for urban forestry within your community, accreditation honors that and acknowledges it, and then puts a kind of a stamp of approval on it. We work really closely with Arbor Day and Tree City program and also Sustainable Forestry Initiative's new standard to make sure that there's kind of the spectrum of accreditation and certification for programs. We're putting some final touches on this, revamping it a bit, and we'll be launching that soon. So if you've ever thought about saying, yeah, I want to put the mark of approval on my program and I want to show our community members, our city council or city manager that we are like top-notch urban forestry, you might want to pursue the accreditation program. Our conference is coming up this November in Chicago. It will be held November 18th and 19th at the Palmer House in Chicago. And if you haven't been to the conference, you need to come. This is where you're with your people. You feel like for once people understand what you're doing if you feel kind of lonely, and they will understand you. You'll get to take some really great tips home and help solve some issues you might be facing in your community. So plan to join us in Chicago. And if you would like to present, our proposals are due tomorrow on May 15th. So would love to have you present and definitely be there in person. Our Municipal Forestry Institute is our leadership training program. And this is beyond our bowl culture. This is how do you become a leader in urban forestry? Already, we host the premier urban foresters in the world, and the Municipal Forestry Institute is there to kind of just push you up a little bit further, help you feel supported, help you feel more confident in your leadership skills, because we need you to be leading urban forestry work across the globe. So we provide this to help you feel as confident and competent in your work you do. This will be opening up in late July, early August. And the Institute will be held next February, likely on the West Coast. So more to come on that soon. Our next learning series will be on June 27th, and it'll come from Florida. Many people in the US, we're starting to see where cities will put in tree policy, but then state laws are being put in place that supersede local policy. Now, so what does that mean for you if you're trying to like push your urban forestry program to the next level, but a state policy might supersede what you're trying to do? This happened in Florida, and they were able to navigate some of those issues. And a gentleman from Tampa, one of our members, will be presenting on that. So I'll drop a link to that, and hopefully you can join us then. And with that, thank you again to our members. Really appreciate having you here. If you're not, please consider joining this. This is our people, so we'd love to have you here. With that, I'm going to stop sharing. Earl and Nathan, are you ready to go?
I think we are.
Yes, we are.
Excellent. Well, all right. So hopefully everyone should be able to see this introductory slide. We are in the nation's capital, so we've titled this Bipartisan Vegetation Management. My name's
Earl. This is looking like it's on one of the last slides, so we did get to the start.
Really?
Or is that just on my end?
No, yeah, it's the last slide.
What does it say?
It's this graph.
Well, that's not right. That's like.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
So it's at the beginning for me now. For you too, Nathan?
Great. Yes.
Okay.
My God, forget what you saw in that chart. Oh my.
Give away the ending.
All right. So again, Bipartisan Vegetation Management. My name is Earl Eutsler. I'm the Associate Director and State Forester here in Washington, D.C., where I've worked for more than 20 years with DDOT's Urban Forestry Division. And for that entire time, had the great sort of pleasure and benefit of working alongside Nathan McElroy, who I'll give him a chance to introduce himself.
Hi, Nathan McElroy from Pepco Vegetation Management. I'm a senior program manager. Like many utility vegetation people, I worked or found my way into utility after working in traditional forestry. And I also spent 3 years in the Peace Corps in South America. So it's great to be on the stage with Earl. We've, as he mentioned, 20 years, and a lot of people have the perception that a utility and municipal guy can't cooperate or be on the stage together, but it's a great privilege to, and also we've become great friends over those years. So full disclosure, thank you.
Thanks, David. Okay, also quick thanks to Leslie and the Society for having us. Full disclosure, I'm the current past president of Urban and Community Forestry Society as well, and really grateful for all of you joining us here. If you're not a member, you should consider, it's an excellent organization with amazing community, so please come along. Okay, I wanted to share this first image here. This is from 2004, the same year that I started at DDOT. And this is coming on the heels of Hurricane Isabel that sort of raked through the district in 2003 and caused really severe outages, long-term outages of, in some places, a week or longer. And we had extensive damage. That hurricane came through in mid-September 2003. And when I started in March of 2004, we were still cleaning up elements from that hurricane. And one of the first things that kind of occurred after I started was a project to, this isn't terminology that we use in the district anymore, but the utility was planning to harden the feeder that ran through this neighborhood. If you could zoom in on that image, you'll see the sign reads, "Save our trees." And of course, it's a little late for that one, but it set off a huge community outrage that how could we be letting these trees be cut down? And of course, I just walked into this. This was literally the people making these decisions literally like retired and left right as the chainsaws fired up. And it was also what it was also in a way Nathan's introduction. And so I just wanted to provide this background and context from the early 2000s to talk about just how much sort of public trust and authority collectively we had lost in the eyes of the public when it came to managing these issues. So just quickly about our team, DDOT's Urban Forestry Division. We have 43 urban forestry staff. The majority of these folks are certified arborists, coming with a variety of backgrounds. We have one electrical utility, Pepco, who has 800 miles of overhead utilities. We have roughly 700,000 residents, and in total, about 2 million trees.
Pepco's part of an Exelon company. You can jump to this next slide, Earl. Exelon is actually the largest distribution company of electric service in the country by customer count. This slide shows a small portion of what's considered Pepco Holdings, which is Atlantic City Electric, Delmarva Power, and Pepco, which is Washington, D.C. and the surrounding counties. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, Exelon purchased Pepco Holdings. So our sister companies, our brother companies are BG&E in Baltimore, Pico, Philadelphia Power and Light, and ComEd out of Chicago and Northern Illinois. So we have a big footprint, and it's great to be part of Exelon.
Perfect. Okay, well, if you're from DC, I see we have several folks from here on the call, but or if you visited here, you're familiar with just how lush and green this city is. I think of it as an incredibly livable city, where we get the right balance of population density, green space, obviously urban forest resources. But to the untrained eye, this just looks like an incredibly lush and green community. But if you look a little more closely, we have multiple overhead circuits running through mature trees, powering up communities. And this is, if you really look closely, we even have like a circuit that's going underground right there to serve most likely that apartment building you see on the left, while the other 13,000 volt feeder is running through the canopy of a mature oak tree before it turns the corner and runs past several other trees. And so I just like this because it highlights all the sort of beauty and grandeur, but also challenge that we face here in DC. And so to kick it off, we're going to talk initially about some of the past policies that were instituted in the district. And when I mean past, some of these date back into the 1800s. And so we're going to kind of do a brief review of what some of these policies and what the implications of those policies from so long ago have meant and how they've manifested. So for instance, we had a policy, the district itself had a vegetation management policy from the 1960s, which stated utility lines must be cleared by the use of directional clearance methods only. And if you're practicing utility arboriculture, you might think, oh, directional pruning. That's today what we mean by that is we're pruning trees so that they're encouraged to grow away from the conductor. But in this policy manual from 1960, that meant instead the removal of internal branches to permit passage of utility lines through the trees where necessary. So it's a complete inversion of what we consider to be a best practice. And so large diameter tree and tree sections were encouraged to mature and grow into and through these overhead circuits. And if you look at this picture, we have two separate circuits, 3 phases each, and their proximity to this tree is so tight that you actually see ceramic insulating pins that have been installed into the tree to generate or to create separation between the wire and the tree. Nathan, up to you.
Yeah, so to reiterate that, these are issues and problems that evolved over decades, literally decades. So those policies were being enforced or were part of the strategy of the management in the district during the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and right into the 80s. There was not good consensus documents that we have now, and even those documents we have now are revised every 5 years approximately. But Shigo didn't, who is many of you know, is somewhat of a grandfather of forestry or excuse me, arboriculture, and he had a lot of recommendations and thoughts about better management of utilities, trees around utilities. So he didn't bring that document or that writing forward until the 1990 approximately. It wasn't until 1995 that we had an ANSI A300, and the best management utility pruning of trees wasn't introduced until 2004. Those are all consensus documents that we have now to point to and to reference and that we agree upon, but they didn't exist when many of these trees were evolving, developing. So when I first came to the district, I struggled with, what are we looking at here? How did which was first, the tree or the utility lines? And you're going to see a lot of slides here that you're going to ask yourself the same question, but the fact of the matter is the utility were there, and these trees were directionally pruned or allowed to grow through the conductors. So we inherited it. Earl and I have been working on these issues for 20 years, and they took probably 50 years prior to that to evolve. So, and there's still many examples of what you're going to see today. There's still many hundreds of examples still out there. So I'll stop speaking on that, and you'll see a lot of examples in the next slides.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. So as Nathan was suggesting, this is an excellent image that highlights what 50, 60, 70 years of policy that today we know is poor policy. This is what it results in. And again, this is another situation where we have two stacked circuits and they're being literally sort of fished through the tree. And you can actually see Nathan down on the sidewalk there looking up at the tree worker in the bucket. Nate?
Yeah. So yeah, as Earl mentioned, this is 2 conductors. And again, this is a tree that was probably planted. I actually met a resident on this street that remembered the planting in the 60s. So, and there's a whole row of, the whole street is tree lined with willow oaks. So, go ahead.
And so that's just a single, that was just a single example. And we had, decades ago, we had over 1,000 trees in situations kind of like this. And this is a example of an ash tree in the Palisades neighborhood of DC that you can see on the left, to the casual observer, to the people that lived around the tree, they revered and adored this tree. This was a kind of a landmark tree in their neighborhood. But if you look at the second picture from the left with that's leaf off, if you look closely, you'll see all the rubber that has been installed on each individual wire to separate the wire from the tree, because as you'll see in the third picture, the repeated contact was causing the tree to actually catch on fire repeatedly over a long time. And Nathan, perhaps you can speak to this fourth picture on the right.
Yeah, the fourth picture is actually a communication wire that has rubber on it. And the reason, and most people are probably wondering, well, why would a communication wire be burning? And that's because the primary voltage from above is actually tracking down the tree to that communication wire, finding ground to that communication wire. So in addition to multiple events of burning, once you have that carbon presence, the tree, the pure carbon is actually even a better conductor than green wood. So it's once you get that carbon there, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah. A couple other examples. The picture on the left, if you look at the left side of the image, you'll actually see some jet line or some rope essentially that is running around the tree lead on the left-hand side of this picture and running to an insulating pin that's then connected and tied to that phase to pull it off of the trunk, where there's just been decades of burning, frankly. So repeated burning on the trunk of this tree, which presents the risk of not only electrifying the tree, but also causing that wire to burn through and drop down to where pedestrians are.
And the picture on the right is an example of a large lead of the tree that was actually below the conductor. People forget that the conductors expand and contract, especially in the summertime. They tend to sag down. And in this case, it was burning the lead below the conductor. So that limb was removed.
Thankfully. Again, more images of the challenge of delivering safe and reliable electricity while also managing these trees. You can see again an image of jet line, or that orange line being tied with an insulating pin to a feeder, to a phase, to pull it and separate it from the tree. And I'll also note that you can see that arm that's extending up with the middle wire. That's intended to create enough separation to keep the wire from dropping down into the crotch of that tree. But that has problems on either side of that line because of what it might do to where that wire is tracking as it runs through the next tree.
Exactly. Earl and I have presented this a few different times, and depending on the audience, I have to remind the audience that these are all examples of things we very much do not want to be happening. People sometimes mistake that we're showing examples of successes. These are, again, things that evolved over decades, and we've been kind of left. We inherited these problems and challenges to resolve. This is another extreme case of Earl just mentioned that there may be consecutive trees in a row, and it's really hard to manipulate those conductors. One lineman said to me once, you know, they're not rubber bands. We can't just move them like rubber bands, which is so true. There's a lot of weight to those conductors.
Yeah. So this is a tree which these are two different Zelkovas, which sometimes people had suggested, now this is a reasonable underwire tree, even though it grows tall because of its form and structure. It's easy to prune around, but in reality, the sway that a Zelkova creates makes it actually incredibly hard to ensure you have sufficient clearance from the power line and the limbs. And I think the tree on the right, we were actually meeting with some of the neighbors around this tree who were upset about the vegetation management that was going to be performed. And we went outside to look at the tree. And while we're standing, the breeze had picked up, and these limbs start slapping into the primary phases there. And it started arcing while we're standing out there underneath the tree, kind of reinforcing just what a safety risk this situation presents. And before I turn this slide over to Nathan, I just want to say that I want to go back to that initial slide where you saw that tree that had been topped out with a sign saying "Save our trees." So we started in this situation where we had lost the public's trust to make informed decisions, make the best decision to manage the tree resource while safeguarding safety for tree workers, the public, and ensuring safe and reliable electrical delivery. And that tension had led to practices where even like inappropriate vegetation management was being done to, in a way, appease the people living behind these trees, so as to take as little as possible. And so with that, Nathan, I'll turn it over and ask you to talk through some of these corrective cuts that were required.
Yeah, sometimes you hear the mantra or thought that less is better, and I think these slides are showing that sometimes more is required and more is actually better. In these cases, less would have probably meant an inappropriate cuts. So there was a lot of reclaiming where there was old stub cuts or stub cuts. The inadequate laterals that were left had now had multiple sprouts, and so we really had to go back to the take that stub all the way back to the parent, and there was, you know, probably thousands of examples like this. So just an example of sometimes more is actually better, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and also it just became a huge communication challenge to explain to people, it looks like we're taking more. And in some regards, we were taking more. We were approving the utility to remove more of the vegetation that had grown into and through the wire zone in some of these instances. But it was the arboriculturally appropriate practice in that instance. And it was correcting some past practices that were actually making the problem, compounding the problem over time. So we just had spent a lot of time meeting with just individual people, tree by tree, trying to regain the public's trust and explain the rationale and the science behind the decisions we were making. So next slide, the next section of this presentation, we pivot into what for me kept coming up as a forgotten topic, which was when we would meet with the public and say, well, listen, we have to take steps to resolve this issue. We have outages, we have trees on fire. These trees aren't safe for us to do proactive maintenance on. People would sometimes push back, and it occurred to me that the population, the the stakeholder group in this equation that was always left out were actually the tree workers. No one was sort of their risk that they were facing to try to maintain these trees was sort of externalized in that conversation. And the truth is, we had hundreds, if not more than that, of trees that were literally unworkable. And it came to be clear to me that unless it's safe for everyone in our sort of our sort of chain of custody of managing these trees, so everyone from those of us that are inspecting them and scheduling work to the people that are delivering the work to the folks who live next to them, walk past them, if it isn't safe for everyone in that in relationship with that tree, then it simply isn't safe at all. And so here we have some images here that kind of illustrate what happens when you can't work a tree. So here's an oak tree just absolutely covered with hypoxylon canker, and it's not our practice to let a tree get this far along before we remove it. But if you look at this lowest lateral, you'll see that there are two high voltage phases that are sitting on pins installed into that limb, plus some rubber to create separation from the wires and the tree. So this is a tree that we couldn't maintain. We could not safely provide routine maintenance to this tree. And eventually taking it down required an outage. But the amount of effort and whatnot involved in coordinating all that took so long that the tree got to this condition before we were able to actually bring all of those necessary resources to bear and safely remove this tree.
Yeah, so the next few slides show some other examples of that. On the left, that tree is actually going through two sets of conductors, and we have a line crew out there, a crane, and of course the bucket tree operator also. And I don't like to admit this now because we don't do it anymore, but this tree was being worked hot, meaning the conductors were hot. When Earl and I took over, one of the strategies was to implement actually more crane usage to remove these trees more safely to keep the tree workers from approaching minimum approach distance. So in other words, we were choking the tree above. I don't know if you can see the yellow strap right above the bucket there, and choking it above, and the line, the tree workers cutting it below the conductors and gently pulling that huge, probably a 2,000 pound piece of wood right through the conductors. It was a step up from our step safer than previously, but we do not do that anymore. We would provide a full outage for the removal of this tree to the district contractors. And I'm very pleased to say that the acceptance of the outages, meaning the inconvenience to our customers, has been very positive. People are very accepting of it, which was always one of the big reasons why we were apprehensive to do, one of the reasons we were apprehensive to do power outages. So very positive from the residents or the customers. On the right, there's an example of another wire literally embedded. That's a neutral wire causing, and you're probably wondering, why would that be burning if it's a neutral wire? Somehow, due to somewhere else on another adjacent tree, there's it's finding path to ground through that neutral. So again, obviously a tree worker, nobody should be working on that tree until that was resolved by a line crew.
Yeah, and I'll just say people are we're finding people are more accepting of planned outages now that the unplanned outages are becoming so less infrequent. All right, here on the left, there's just so much going on to for us to have managed to remove and manage the trees that you see here. If you, starting from the left, in fact, if you look all the way at the top, above and slightly to the right of the bucket, you'll notice that one of the phases is actually tied to a tree. That's to give some separation from another section further down that's being worked. And then you see the lineman in a bucket with the orange or the yellow sleeves on. And if you look just to the left of his bucket, he's actually connected to one of the other phases and pulling that so the tree worker that's beneath him can make, I even hesitate to even call it a safe cut, but physically providing separation between the tree and the wire, so that person can make that cut. And while this, again, Nathan was saying, we considered this to be sort of an innovation in the direction of safety, we wouldn't consider this the safest way to work these situations at this time. And so we're no longer doing business this exact way. And I don't know, Nathan, do you want to talk about this image on the right?
No, but I'll just elaborate a little more on that on the left. That, yeah, we're not, that tree worker had to be below a conductor, that it was being moved so that he wouldn't break minimum separation. So instead we pulled the conductor above him, and there's things that can go wrong. So there was a lot of self-reflection, a lot of assessment. Fortunately, we did not have any injuries or worker incidents that made us tighten up our safety protocols. But this would definitely be provided a full outage to work it for that removal.
Box elders in that image. Just another image of one of our contractors pulling an enormous section of a tree through live circuits right there. And granted, those wires are rubbered up, but they are not, that is in no way insulated. And the truth is these trees are growing, nothing's ever growing straight up. And so the delicate dance that the bucket operator and the crane operator would go through as they started to cut, and he would say, bring it this way a little bit to try to take the pressure off, because once he finally cut that all the way free, if he hadn't adjusted the crane so that section was directly plumb, it would sway. And if that happened, we could have catastrophe with transformers exploding, lines faulting, and circuits tripping. So just a wild situation, something that a type of situation that we have so many fewer instances of now, thankfully.
Yeah, that tree also was actually actively failing, meaning it was lifting at the root plate, and so it was an emergency removal. But definitely my hat's off to the operators, the district contractors that are doing some of this work with the cranes. Just absolutely incredible work. And again, the photo on the right is again demonstrating the potential for failure. Either the wire either can burn through or the lead can burn through. So either way, it's going to be an issue. If that lead burns through, and it's going to lay on the wires and definitely cause an outage. And if the wire burns through, it's going to drop down to the ground, create a very significant hazard, and likely also cause an outage. So just one more example.
Yeah. All right, so we've kind of gone through and shown how past policy, some of it quite old, has sort of generated a few thousand seriously problematic tree and wire conflicts, mature tree and wire conflicts across the city. And then some of the some of the risk that presented as we tried to unwind those conflicts and the challenges that presented for safety, starting with the safety of the tree worker. And so everything we've kind of showed you right now is us cutting trees and removing trees and all of that. But I do want to say our work with Pepco has been super productive because they recognize that this is the city of trees here, Washington, D.C., and they have been excellent partners in coming up with collaborative solutions. So all these examples we've shown you were trees where because of the repeated contact between wires and trees, they had burned, they had developed cavities, they needed to be removed. But we have lots of instances across the city where the tree was in excellent health. It was a high quality tree, and Pepco was willing to modify and upgrade its wire configuration, essentially re-engineer the infrastructure around trees to accommodate them. Not in the crazy janky ways that we showed you here with insulating pins in the stem of trees and like rubber hose and lines trying to pull wires off of trees, but actual engineered solutions. And so between the 2 decades worth of work to reduce these conflicts, along with our adopted policy of right tree, right place, we've been able to resolve problems and not create new ones in that 20-year period. And so we're going to take just a few slides here and talk through what some of these results have looked like and the ways we've been able to work together to achieve them.
This slide shows just the density of how dense the population of what we considered conflict trees, where you have either the direct contact or large trees through the conductors. By cataloging them, we were better able to manage where the biggest priorities were, by also understanding where the biggest customer impact would be, meaning if one of those trees failed or burnt through, how many customers would it impact? So this is Davey Resource Group is our work planner that goes out and creates work plans in advance. This was a feature that was added on to again, so we could better manage the population out there and know where the problems are. I could also, when a certain circuit was having an engineering project done on it, I could pull up the trees in advance and consult with the engineering and say, here are the trees that are right through the conductors, or here are the trees that have hard contact. We need to do something about them. So this is just one tool that we use to help manage.
Yeah, and very valuable. Sorry, go ahead, Nathan.
Well, I would say that the light green on these are considered resolved. So the olive green is the most common on here, and those are considered resolved. So that's good news.
Progress, yeah. Yeah, I mean, this slide kind of captures the fact that when we first tried starting to like wrap our hands around this problem, there were even if we had full consensus among the community, like, oh, let's just go fix all of this, the problem was too severe to actually go fix everything all at once. And so using Nathan's own prioritization along with our prioritization, we managed to sort of work on those trees that were presented the greatest risk, and then could keep working through that list, keeping track of what we had achieved. And then again, like I said, through the decisions we were making on tree planting, we plant between 6,500 and 8,000 trees a year. So in the last 20 years, we've planted an enormous number of trees. And for me, it's very gratifying to know that we, for the most part, haven't been creating new problems and new conflicts as we've been resolving them, like we've shown here. And so what the last slide we really have here is I hope it doesn't look too busy, but on the top in blue is basically a reliability index related to tree-caused outages on the overhead network in Pepco's system in the district dating back to 2006. And on the bottom in green is our tree canopy percentage in the right-of-way, similarly going back to 2006. And so I sometimes call this a have your cake and eat it too slide, because we've managed in DC over the past 20 years to increase both tree canopy and the reliability of overhead through these collaborative approaches to correcting past wrongs and past policies that created all of these conflicts, while also increasing the safety of not just the public, but also the folks who are actually on the business end of these equations and managing the trees directly, the folks with the chainsaws in their hands.
This is definitely my favorite slide. Powerful there to show the F in the index there on the left. It says tree safety. The F is for frequency. So again, we have a reduced frequency of tree-caused outages while we have an increase in tree canopy. So a win-win, and hope to keep those trends going. I think we're definitely on the trajectory.
Yeah, we've got a good path here. And I'll just flag, you'll see this label 2012 derecho, where we saw that frequency of outage spike back up. That was the first derecho that I'd ever experienced, and the damage was severe and widespread. But in the time since, we've had I believe 2 other derechos in the district and a hurricane. And while you see there may be some year-to-year fluctuation in this chart, the overall incidence, the frequency of outages, clearly declining dramatically. So we've been able to sustain the reliability while also growing the tree canopy. So we're very happy about that. And so I guess at this point, we'd be happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Yeah. Thanks, Earl and Nathan. That's really interesting. Appreciate you sharing your perspective. If you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand. We'll bring you off mute. And again, this is approved for ISA CEUs. I will drop the form here in the chat in just a second. Earl and Nathan, as I was thinking, I used to teach a volunteer tree training course here in Des Moines area, and part of it was having our local utility forester come and present, and the eyes wide open for folks that probably, I'm sorry to say, called Mid-American tree butchers. I'm sure you've heard this. So I was curious if you could talk a little bit more about that public outreach, because there must have been a lot of public outreach at the very start of this. And you referred to like on one of those site visits that you went on. Was there other things you did to help communicate to the public what was going to be changing for them or what you'd be seeing?
Yeah, so that what I didn't say at the beginning is that slide that showed the very first slide, we actually collectively were put into a work stoppage. The mayor of the district stopped vegetation management by both the utility and his own urban forestry team, which was, that there's not much further you can fall. So we had a lot of ground to sort of regain. So we did everything from intensive door-to-door door hangers, knockers, individual notification saying, this is what we're planning to do. We did a lot of work to promote and make people aware of the routine maintenance cycles. So Pepco's on a 2-year interval here in the district, which is excellent. It allows us to be super targeted with the vegetation management. And then we did a lot of public meetings. I mean, we used to meet with community groups, civic organizations. There were times when it was every week we were meeting with someone based on where maintenance was planned next, or what maintenance had just been performed. So it was literally an all of the above approach to connecting with the public, sharing the why behind we were doing it, and explaining these best practices.
Yeah, dedication to the cycle plan is very important too. People, you can't just wait till there's things are burning up, you got to try to be proactive. So we have, for my entire career at Pepco, very consistently been there every 2 years to resolve the biggest problems and preventing new ones.
Thanks. Doris, I saw you or had your hand raised that you put it in the chat, so we can do either way. But first, there's a question in the Q&A. How do you balance, negotiate the high cost of dealing with these special situations across 2 agencies? Are there policies to follow that dictate responsibility, or is that a big challenge?
Yeah, so Nathan, maybe it's best for you to take that one. I keep paying my bill as a Pepco customer, for one, but
well, there is fortunately the District of Columbia is a great partner in addressing these problems. They, for example, Pepco is when Pepco makes the situation safe or approachable for their contractor to remove a tree, they're paying that part of the cost, meaning the removal of the tree. They're the owner of the tree, they're the manager of that tree, in the big picture. When we provide a power outage, which is very costly, both in terms of impact to customers, but also to have linemen out there to do the work of de-energizing, the district contract, or the district pays their contractor for that service of removal. So that's one piece of the puzzle, one part. Maybe that, I don't know if that fully answers their question, but yeah, these removals are very costly. Prior to the providing the outages, we were attempting a system of cost sharing on the large removals, where Pepco paid half and the district paid half. So and when they worked them hot. So we also, of course, provide topping service if it's something that the line clearance contractor can approach without breaking minimum separation. We'll just top the tree, and the district's contractor will complete the cleanup. So a lot to unpack in that question. I'm not sure if I did it justice.
Yeah, I think that's a great start. And if there's additional questions or follow-up, please feel free to put that in. And then Earl, I saw you answer that question from Doris. Can past policies be changed? Sounds like you guys have an updated vegetation management plan in place. And is that something you guys collaborated on to put in together, or what did that look like?
Yeah, actually, yeah, that was from 2006, and really was driven from, you can draw a straight line from the hurricane in 2003, severe outages, very poor reliability coming out of that storm, and then a desire to increase reliability through vegetation management that wasn't, well described to the public, and so coming out of that, we worked collaboratively to come up with a vegetation management plan that, is, as I put in the chat, aligned with best practices and conforms to federal safety regulations. So we're doing what's right by the tree, we're doing what's right by the tree worker, and by that, we're doing what's right for the public, particularly when you add into that the fact that we're no longer planting tall stature trees under power lines. And since we have a moment longer, I'll just also mention that in this 20-year period, Pepco has invested heavily, and this might speak a little bit to the last question about the expense, but Pepco has invested substantially in upgrading their infrastructure. And part of what that has meant is what when I started were 35-foot utility poles have in most cases been upgraded, not in every case, but in most cases have been upgraded to a minimum of 45-foot high power poles. And so while that has created some challenges in places where we had mature trees that had an established clearance envelope from a 35-foot height circuit that now moved up 10 feet, it also opened up and broadened the palette of what we could plant under those power lines that were now 10 feet taller. So that too has been quite helpful.
Yeah, so to also elaborate on what Earl just mentioned is the management document. I originally I wasn't in favor of having such a document, but it's been great to have an agreement on file to be able to point to over all these years. And just it also is a good reminder that we serve the same customers or residents, and we're sharing the same space. 95% of what we're talking about here is in public space. So it's really important to have a document that you can point to say this is how we do things.
Yeah. We are approaching the top of the hour. I dropped in the ISACU form in the chat. If you're seeking those, please fill out that form. I'm trying to, as we wrap up here, I'm trying to think, I don't know if I have a question yet. So I'm seeing people say, bravo on the collaboration creates hope. Others saying, you writing decisions of the past. Previous to this, I have heard, I think someone on this call mentioned to me who's a member that they get frustrated that their utility forester and utility does not notify them when they're going to come through and do tree work. And so, again, I'm trying to identify the question. Why do you think these tensions happen? And maybe I just outlined it there. And do you have any advice? Like maybe, Nathan, you could protect the innocent in other places you work. It sounds like you've got a great relationship here. Where have you seen it gone awry, and are there things you'd like to see improved? Earl, has it always been rosy? Maybe you don't want to say in front of Nathan, but like what advice would you give others? Is that too big of a question?
I know why Earl's laughing is because often I start this presentation out by mentioning that my predecessors and Earl's predecessor, in my first week, I witnessed them practically coming to blows, beating each other up. So they're screaming at the top of their lungs with their noses 6 inches apart. So
yes, this is what I think of with utility and urban foresters.
That was my first impression, and I thought, well, I'm not going to operate that way. And look, fortunately, Earl didn't have that demeanor either. So I would say to reach out to advice to other municipality people. I would reach out. Utility arboriculture has come a long way, and there are a lot of utility arborists out there that want to help and do the right thing or work in collaboration. Our tree line USA utilities, that's one thing that I would strongly encourage if they're not, to ask their utility if they're tree line, and if they are, they should be cooperating and notifying a little better.
Yeah, and I'll just round out that answer by saying I think all the parties have to think systematically about this. So when Pepco can see that we're no longer creating future problems through our planting decisions, and we can see their justified insistence on safe and reliable power delivery, well, then we have a lot of common ground. And like Nathan said, we're managing the same space. And so it's in our interest to work together. And I think this presentation shows sort of the art of what's possible when we do just that. So, well, listen, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to come talk to everyone today. Leslie, thank you for inviting us.
Appreciate having you here. Thank you, Earl and Nathan. That's really great to hear from you both.
Enjoyed it.
The ISACU form is there. I'm going to wrap this now. Join us next month, and we'll hope to see you soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.